Welcome to Equip, and welcome back to our Teaching on the Hill series from Matthew 5, 6, and 7. This is Jesus' most famous teaching. So far we've covered the first 20 verses, and we saw all these people that Jesus says are blessed because they count on God to come through or they serve God. Then we saw what Jesus had to say about how the Old Testament points to him. Now, for the next 28 verses, we're going to see the same pattern come up over and over again, where Jesus is going to tell them, you have heard it said this. And then he lays out a command to them that they think they're supposed to be following. Then Jesus says, but I tell you this. Then he gives them the same command, but it's way, way harder. He's saying it's way more difficult to obey God's law than you ever thought. Well, why is Jesus doing this? Why is he giving these really strict and pretty much impossible to follow commands? Well, it's for two reasons. One, he's trying to help us see that we need forgiveness. He's showing us the bar is way, way up here. If you want entrance into Jesus' perfect kingdom, into heaven, which is perfect, with a perfect God there providing for your needs perfectly, you have to be, guess what? Perfect. Thankfully, Jesus died in our place to cover our sin, to cover our imperfection. So even imperfect and sinful me can be forgiven. The second reason that Jesus is laying out these strict commands is to show us what we should be striving for. We should try to get as close as we can to this picture that Jesus is giving. Now, of course, we shouldn't do that in order to try to be saved. That's what we put our trust in Jesus for. But we should do it for some really good reasons. One, to show gratitude to Jesus for saving us. Two, to help others, since that's the heart of the commands. And three, to make life work for yourself. In other words, you should obey Jesus' commands for joy, gratitude to Jesus, helping others, and make life work for yourself, J-O-Y. It'll help you remember it, I promise. I know it's cheesy, but get over it. Let's read about murder and anger from Matthew 5, verses 21 to 26. Jesus starts with a pretty popular command: do not murder. Stop all the murdering, obviously. But then he's talking about these angry words that if we use them, we could be judged. We could be considered guilty before God if we tell someone, you fool or you idiot. What's the connection here? It's hateful, angry thoughts that lead to hateful, angry words. Sorry, I'm a child apparently. That lead to hateful, angry actions like murder. And Jesus is saying it's all bad, and any of it can get us shut out of heaven. So don't obey Jesus' teaching to get to heaven. Instead, do it for joy, to show gratitude to Jesus, to help others, and make life work for yourself. Do it for joy. Do what? What is Jesus telling us to do? Well, first of all, we should be very, very, very careful with the way we use our words. This doesn't mean you should never get angry or express anger. But there's a big difference between saying, hey man, that makes me angry, or hey, that's really not cool. Those are way different than saying, you idiot, or you fool, or you whatever else, something way, way worse. Because words can wound. I think we all know that from experience. You could probably think of things that people said to you a long time ago, words that stabbed you in the heart. And you still have a scar from it, and you still remember exactly what the person said to you. I bet if you think hard enough, you could think of a time where you were the one that used your words to hurt someone else. This is an area we all struggle in, and we can all do better. The other thing Jesus is telling us to do is to do good to people that you are in conflict with. A conflict is any kind of fight where it's you versus someone else, and not all conflict is bad. But Jesus is saying that we need to be careful about conflict. We're going to have a whole lesson on conflict when we get to chapter 7. But now let's just look at the two little things Jesus says about it here. One, he says we should do good to people we're in conflict with as a way to serve God. That's what he means when he says if you have your offering at the temple, you're bringing an offering to God. He says if you're doing that and you remember that someone has a problem with you, drop your offering right there, go fix the problem with the person, and then come back. The people would have been thinking, but those offerings are important. And Jesus is saying yes, and fixing things with your friend is even more important. So when you got a problem with someone, when you got to apologize, when you got to forgive, do it now. The other reason we should do good to people we're in conflict with is that it will make our lives easier. He brings up the example of going to court. Like if someone is suing you, like dragging you to court saying because you did this thing, you owe me money or you have to go to jail. Jesus is saying if you find yourself in a conflict, solve it now. Don't let it get that far. If you move toward the person, if you talk to them, if you communicate with them, if you're like, hey, I'm sorry, and hey, let's be friends, that's going to work out way better for you. Because when you talk to people, when you communicate, people are reasonable. But when you just back away and away and away and away and you don't communicate and you let problems grow and grow and grow, that's when people become unreasonable. So in this section on the command, do not murder, Jesus shows us that we struggle with this in our hearts, and he shows us a good way forward. And he's going to do that with various other commands as we go on in this section. So we'll see you for the next one tomorrow, and until then, be strong in grace.